Like many gifted business owners, you may struggle to take pride in your accomplishments. You may have a hard time celebrating your wins. And if that's the case for you, then this video is going to be very valuable. Now, I'll say at the outset, if you have a hard time celebrating your wins, it's probably because you are winning the wrong game. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there's the game that the ego plays. And there's the game that the soul plays. And many of us, as entrepreneurs, we get sucked inadvertently into the games that the ego plays. And ultimately, it's important for us to know that the ego is a way of experiencing ourselves, defined in large part by shame and anxiety. We're attempting to prove our worth. We're worried about some awful scenario we imagine in the future. And we scramble to hedge off shame and anxiety, shame and anxiety. And I find in my experience as a coach and a therapist working with entrepreneurs at many different levels of success, the world of entrepreneurship is in large part unconsciously over-identified with the ego's goals, motivated in large part by shame and anxiety. The soul perspective is altogether different. And again, I'm gonna reiterate the point that if you are failing to celebrate your wins along the way, you might be winning the wrong game. So let's talk about the soul perspective as an alternative game. The soul, if I can offer a provisional definition based on the work of James Hillman in archetypal psychology, the soul is what makes meaning possible. The soul deepens events into experiences. The soul has a religious concern. It is communicated through love. It has a special relationship with death. And ultimately, the soul is something like the imaginative possibility of our nature. Now, the game the soul plays and the game the ego plays, even just with those ideas that you can imagine, are very different. And I find that many business owners inadvertently get caught up trying to fulfill ego goals and playing the ego game. And they can perform at an exceptionally high level doing so. And ultimately, they find that all of those accomplishments, all of those wins, all of that praise they garner feels hollow. Whereas, if they can shift their focus to the soul's game and the soul's goals, then it's ultimately much more fulfilling. They can take much more pride. They can experience deeper meaning and fulfillment. So, if you're up for it, I'd love to walk you through a reflective practice that can help you orient toward the soul perspective. Now, we do, in this practice, have to work from an imagined base of ego fulfillment. The ego, so concerned with shame and anxiety, it is hungry for certain things. The ego is essentially the sense of I that most of us have. So, for this practice, if you have a sheet of paper handy and something to write with, it's going to go a long way. So at the outset, think about all of the things that you want for yourself in your life. What ultimately constitutes success for you? What is it that you have been working so hard to achieve in your business? Now, maybe it is scaling your team up so that you can effectively retire. They can do all the work for you. Maybe it is having enough cash set aside that you can put in the down payment on that beautiful property that just opened up there that you imagined would be so nice. It's got the home, it's got the waterfront. Maybe it's who knows what, publishing the book, building the course, developing the intellectual property, whatever the case is for you. What do you want? What is it that you've been working so hard to achieve? Now, it's important that we start there because what I find is that the soul craft perspective, it ultimately can help us accomplish those things without prioritizing those things. All of these things that you've been working so hard to achieve Can you imagine if they were simply fringe benefits of something much deeper? Well, I think you're going to like this because that turns out can be the case. So, if you've clarified for yourself what constitutes success in your world and success in your work, then let's imagine if, or rather, let's say when you have achieved all of that, to what would you love to devote your attention? So, assuming that you have achieved all of whatever it is you just wrote out or thought for yourself, when you've achieved all of that, then what would you love to give your attention to? Now, maybe it's hard to imagine. For many of us, it's strange to think that all of our goals are a place that we could reach from rather than just something we get to. Now, in my case, I'm quite fortunate that the things I would focus on then are largely the things that I focus on now. It's clear to me that when I achieve all of what I'm looking to achieve, then I'm going to continue giving my attention to healing generational trauma and building generational wealth in my life and the lives of those that I serve. Now, that is a clue for me. It lets me know that I'm on the right track. And I don't know if that's going to be the case for you. When you've achieved all of what you're working so hard to achieve, are you still loving to devote your attention to the things that you're focused on now? Or do you find that your attention is drawn elsewhere? And notice the specific phrase in this question, the qualities of love and devotion. You can see that this starts to steer us away from the ego games that maybe we've been winning and toward the soul's perspective with its religious concern, its communication in love. That's a first pass. You might take some time to reflect on this. When you've achieved everything that you want to achieve, then what would you love to devote your attention to? Now, we can take this a little bit further. We can continue to deepen into our soul perspective through its special relationship with death. And you might then consider, if you were to die tomorrow, what longings would go unfulfilled in your life? If you were to die tomorrow, what longings would go unfulfilled? See, we find that the soul is closely connected with love, longing, and loss. The soul aches, it yearns. And when you consider your life from the ultimate vantage point of death, it is quite clear, I imagine, that there are longings that you're aware of in your heart that would go unfulfilled if you were to die tomorrow. So, what are those? Now, we can take this a little bit further as well. Again, from the vantage point of your ultimate death, what, if you were to die tomorrow, what ugliness or injustice would persist? So, if you were to die tomorrow, what ugliness or injustice would persist? And these, boy, these are not questions we are, or themes, I should say. These are not themes that we as business owners often consider. Certainly not in the world of performance coaching, mindset, all of that stuff that the entrepreneurial world gets so wrapped up in. These have a way of deepening us. These have a way of stirring our heart's desires. They get us out of our head and into something much more like a sense of destiny in our lives. Ugliness and injustice, these are things that, again, stir the heart. They awaken an embodied aesthetic quality and an ethic to them. We look to things that are unfair. We look to things that are ugly, and we're repulsed by them. They're revolting. Those things ask for remediation in our lives. And so again, if you were to die tomorrow, what longing would go unfulfilled? What ugliness or injustice would persist? And if you reflect upon these questions, along with that question of what you would love to devote your attention to, you're going to find that you've written out a number of things that, oh boy, are perhaps very different than what you've been pursuing in your day-to-day entrepreneurial career. Now, if there is a gap between these things, I want to acknowledge that it can be a very jarring experience. This, I find, can be deeply upsetting and unsettling for people. There's also a way where it can be a sigh of relief. Something perhaps settles, and we find the sense of gravity. We find the gravitas of our lives. What if I can invite you to imagine yet further, what if the pursuit of these things, the pursuit of the soul's goals, could bring about the fulfillment of all of those ego goals, all of the things that you want and have been working so hard for? Could you entertain that possibility? Now, that may be quite a stretch of the mind. There may be all sorts of ways that you resist or have a hard time imagining that. And I want to suggest that chief among those would be the ego's familiar games of shame and anxiety. If you imagine the soul's goals and you imagine the possibility that they could fulfill all of the ego's goals, the ego may raise its hackles and clamor at you and say, well, who are you to have all of that? What makes you think you could do all of that? It'll try and cut you down to size. It may have all sorts of anxiety clamoring into. It may say, well, okay, that sounds nice, but it'll never work. No one's going to take you seriously. If you try that, then you're going to fail. It's going to come up with all sorts of negative predictions about the future. And it's going to come up with all sorts of past reasons why you're not the one to do all of that. You could never. You are so broken. You are so small. You are so limited. Ultimately, shame and anxiety are ways that the ego perpetuates itself through time. The ego is obsessed with a sense of continuity of experience, continuity defined by the guardrails of shame and anxiety. So if, as you consider the soul's goals as a means of fulfilling the ego's demands, let's say, what it wants, what it craves, if you find that these doubts creep in, worries about the future, thoughts of inevitable failure, concerns about who you are, what makes you think you can get away with it, if you find that that's the case, I'm going to encourage you to go to learnfromchandler.com. You're going to see a web page there that has a link to a workshop I've put together that will connect you to your embodied resources at moving past these, frankly, these limiting beliefs. So there's a workshop I put together that uproots these limiting beliefs from the bodily perspective so that you can deepen into your soul's contribution without getting so caught up in your head all of the time. So again, the link for that is learnfromchandler.com. And look, whether you go and you follow that workshop or not, it's about 45 minutes. Whether you follow that workshop or you're content with the material we've covered in this video thus far, I hope you find that these ideas are a blessing. What I find in my own life and the lives of the clients that I work with is that this orientation toward the soul's goals brings about a much deeper relationship with our work. It's not just a business that we're running. It's not just entrepreneurship that we're pursuing. This is a way to turn work into soulcraft, to engage in something in a way that feels like a natural extension of who you are, so that what you do unfolds from who you are, and you have guidance moment by moment as to how to go about doing it. So, regardless, again, of if you go to learnfromchandler.com or not, I appreciate your attention thus far. I know that it is your most precious resource, And again, I hope that these ideas are a blessing in your life and the lives of those that you serve as well.